Hi there. Just a couple real quick things about a brand new dryer. This hopper contains the powder, and generally speaking, we like it to see about halfway full when we start to add powder with this shaft. About mid shaft is plenty. And over here, there's a divider valve. And I just want to point out before we get started is that the suction motor that holds the film to the belt, it always has suction on this pipe, which is what comes across the top. And there's a valve, and you have the option of turning on the suction for the back. And that's typically only used when you load film. During normal operation, you could just run the suction on the top, and you get the option to turn off the back. And I'll show you that on the switch on the other side. But I just wanted to start out and show you this side. It's the powder recirculation system. It moves the powder across, up an elevator, and then puts it in here. So when you go to add powder, you can either drop it in the trough through the top, or you can add it to the hopper. Whatever's your most convenient. Just keep an eye on your fingers since it starts and stops periodically. Okay, hey, to initially power on the unit, once you put power to it down here, there's a circuit breaker that you just turn in the on position. So there's a breaker, you're gonna want it on. And then at that point, the power is controlled by these two buttons. They both do the same function. This button turns the machine off and on, or if it's on and you need to, you can shut it off by pushing it down and then turn it back on. So whichever way you choose to power it down, with the button or with the emergency stop. Just know that it's a twist to release. Things to note about the actual machine. Here's your operator panel. And starting in, we'll just start in this corner and go across. These two devices control a temperature for the heat zones. They can be turned off or on. So the top is the top 3 volts and the bottom is the bottom zone. And I'll show you right here. The top zone, there's a splitter about right here. So the upper zone is this area and the second one controls the bottom half. The bottom zone actually does the curing, and the top half is more of a preheater and begin to cure the ink. So heat rises, generally depending on your powder, but we start them around 85 degrees on both zones, knowing that the bottom display is your set point and your top is your actual. Since we powered it up, you can see that they're both beginning to climb. To get a full cure, you want them to be at the set point value. If you need to make the change, it's really simple. You just simply push the set button, make your change up or down, and then push the set button to store it. And these two units all operate the same. Set it to flash it, make your changes, and then set to store it. I'm gonna set this one back at 85 because that's where our glue cures at. So while we wait for it to come up to temperature, the next box to the right, this is our conveyor belt control. It typically is in the on position, and we usually run it somewhere between 10 and 20. Now the speed of the conveyor belt is determined on the output of the printer. So you want it to just be slightly faster regardless of whatever output the printer is, so that the film will advance and it won't create a ball of film inside. So the number is not really specific as long as it's slightly faster than the printer output. And the reason being is that it's controlled in the automatic position by a photo eye, and I'll show you right around the front here. There's a sensor. There's a sensor right there, and when it detects the film, then it turns the conveyor belt off and on. So occasionally that may get some dust. You might have to just wipe it off. But that photo eye controls the belt. There's a front guide plate heat. The settings are identical to these two zones, but this one here is powered off and on with this controller. Once again, off and on, front guide heat. It's set at 60, it's currently at 56, and this specific device is listed right here. It goes right here. And it is your preheater for the ink to gel right before you apply the powder. So there's 3 heaters on the dryer, this one here, and then the upper and the lower zones on the curing oven. The next is the powder feed system. It's powered off and on with this switch. Typically it runs in the on position. The left half of the display is the off delay. Currently this one's set to 9 seconds. and the right half of it is set for 9 seconds on. So if you wish to make a change, you just power it down, make an adjustment to the numbers, increasing it by 1 decibel makes it 19, turning it on, and you will see the system is going to rest for 19 seconds, and then it will apply powder. And these settings are determined on the granule size and just how fast it's falling off during the beating position when it knocks it off. So you'll see it switch, there's your rest, and then it goes to your automated side, and I'll show you right up here that. And it runs the entire system. The auger across the bottom, the elevator, you see it adding powder, and then it comes down. To control the powder amounts, there are these sliding chutes, and you can open them, slide them up, and you will see the powder drop down. There's 2 of them. We pretty much run them almost all the way, but if you need your powder to be distributed, feel free to close them and make that work for you. You'll see it's lifting the powder nicely. You can see it dropping, and then it falls out. More of these buttons over here. We'll move to the bottom row. This round knob controls the shaker or the beater after it gets dust applied across the film. This is used to knock it off where the glue is not necessarily. So I'll turn it on and I'll show you that actual function. It's right in here. There's a beater bar, and you can see it start to rotate, and that's what knocks the dust off of the unnecessary portions, basically where there's no lighting. So the cooling switch controls the cooling. After it comes out of the dryer, you run the cooling, it'll cool it off before it winds itself back up. And so I'll show you those cooling fans. They're on the back here. You can see them, they start to cool. They just blow cold air onto it as the film comes out of the curing oven. The suction switch is what sucks the film to the conveyor belt. Most of the time it's always on, and that's the one that adds it. Now, a while ago I mentioned that there you could switch the zones, and this switch controls the zones. So up is the top zone, which is probably the normal config. And for loading the film, if you wish to turn on the rear bar, you just simply push it on, and that adds the additional suction. The valve is turning, and it will start to suck along the back. So for loading film, you're going to want it in the lower position. During normal production, if you're using the take-up reels, you could get away with just using the top zone, but that's what that does. So that covers the cooling switch, the suction motor, the front guide switch we talked about, that's this heater, and the powder system is this system, and that is the control. Now I'll show you how to load film through it. Okay, at this point I want to focus the attention to the back of the machine, and specifically I want to look at this button here. This is the conveyor belt, and in the auto position is when it runs on that photo eye that it automatically starts and stops the conveyor. And in the manual position, that just forces the conveyor belt on at that predetermined speed. You can look in here, you can see my belt start to move. So it overrides the photo eye, and it forces the belt through. It won't stop. So typically if you're manually feeding the film and watching it, you can run it in manual. But under normal circumstances, it is in the auto position, and it's run off the photo eye. Do note that this take-up motor system is also connected to the belt. So I'll turn this switch in on, and I'm going to turn this in auto, and you'll see that this starts to spin. You can turn it off, or you can run it the opposite direction. Typically we wind the film on itself, so it always goes in the forward direction. It has 2 motors. Loosening these set screws, you can slide in a take-up roll, and then we typically just slide them together and get ready to attach the film. Just generally finger tight on these. We don't want to indent the tube. It makes it hard to slide it, but just snug so that it won't walk away. There are some clutches on the side, and I would advise that we probably loosen this almost all the way. And you will see that the motor's spinning because my conveyor belt is on, but I'm not doing any work. So as you slowly start to apply pressure, this starts to do work, but you don't want it to be so strong that it pulls the film through the machine, because this only has 1 speed. So it will always work and the motor will spin, but you don't necessarily need it to yank the film. We want the conveyor belt to advance the film, and this just merely picks up any slack. So tighter applies more pressure. We generally run them really loose, and do know that since it's 2 motors, you have to make the adjustment to both sides. So pretty much all the way. I just want to point it out. A simple touch will stop it, and that's how that works. So I will switch this to automatic, and then I'm going to show you how to load some film. Okay, at this time we're going to advance some film. Just for safety, I'm going to turn the heaters off so that I don't get burned. I'm also going to turn the beater to the off position because I'm going to stick my hands in there as well as the powder feeder just for safety. Just to do it, I'm going to release these 2 latches. I'm going to open the unit and I'll show you how the paper goes through. And you can see these are the air zones that attach the suction when the switch is in that lower position to add suction to the back. So now we'll just feed it through. Using the printer. We'll just advance some film. It's important to know that in order to get it through the unit, you just have to go below the upper trough. You can see the film going in now. I'm just going to let a little bit go through it. And then I'm going to make sure that... Okay, so now for advancing the film through, I'm just going to push it through here with my hands. It's important to note that you just have to get it underneath this powder. Eventually the weight of the film will cause it to go lower in between the bars, and then the photo eye will start picking it up. So for now, I'm just going to get it through this one, and I just need to make suction and make contact with this first row of suction. You can see it begin to hold the film down. And then at this point, since I'm still in automatic, if I just advance the film, the belts will begin to go. You see it starting to pick it up there. So I'm making sure that it makes this top corner right here, and it starts catching the lower zone. You can walk up, see it come around, making suction. It'll begin to hold. I'm just going to walk it through. For sake of the video, I'm just going to speed it up real quick just to get it through. And so there's one silver roller right here. We just want to go behind that one. And then it comes out. This is the one that has the bearings. And therefore, once we get enough out here, we can put a little piece of tape or some way to hold it to the roller. That one will just manually run it. And then we just secure it to a take-up roller. And we're ready to close it up and turn on the heating elements once it's all aligned, and it'll trim to go for it. So we'll close it up, and then we're ready to turn the powder on and start printing. Okay, now that we've got the film threaded through, it's behind that silver roller and it's on the take-up wheel. Our switch is back in the automatic position, so it's totally ready to run. I would turn the heater zones back on, a little bit of the beater bar to make sure, and then the powder feeder at this time. All the switches typically run in the on position. Like I said, I could just run this in the top, since I just need the suction on the top to advance the belt. We see that everything starts to work, and then taking a look inside, the beater's just barely going. Less is more as far as beating it. The film is starting to get powder on it, and then as the printer prints, we're ready to just start pushing through. You can see all that, and that's the daily operation to start the dryer. Hey, the last thing I wanted to point out is that the dryer has these side little baffles, and we typically want to run them about a business card off the side, and they prevent the dust from falling out when it's all aligned. And so if the closer they are, the dust will be contained, and you can find that you can run a longer resting cycle on the dust, up to almost 30 seconds running for 9. But the amount that you have to run the powder feeder is determined by how much it falls off. And so we don't want to distort the film in any way, but as close as you can get it to where the majority of the dust remains, it will just help you. It also helps keep the film straight coming off the printer, and therefore straight going out the dryer. So these two sides are there You get them adjusted. Once they're set for your film, as long as the width doesn't change, you probably never have to touch them again, but that's the last thing.